Because I think this is where things get fun, right? We establish the fact that Bitcoin miners help produce net new energy assets. There's countless examples today. There's going to be many more in the future. And if that's true, we're going to have more energy, more widely distributed around the world, which is good for humans. So yeah, harnessing any energy anywhere can be monetized. Existing energy assets are more economical, and the cost of capital or the cost of producing new energy is decreased, right? Those are the base incentives. So what happens in 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years? And this was very fun for me to think about. You asked, how do I do these thinking? This was the best part of the article, in my opinion. So the first one is that Bitcoin mining is the catalyst that leads us to energy abundance, okay? Meaning pretty much zero marginal cost of energy. So all intents and purposes, our day-to-day life, energy is pretty much free. And the analogy is that similar to how when the internet's getting built out, there was demand for broadband, demand for faster internet. Simply having the demand led to a supply increase, right? That's a market signal that says everybody wants this product. So shit, we better invest really quick and get this product everywhere. And I think the same is with Bitcoin mining. There's now demand for energy anywhere in the world. So people are getting creative, building new ways to harness it. And at scale, that's going to be a massive increase in energy for humans. Tangential point here, unrelated to the article. I have this thesis, and I'm not alone here, but the thesis is that in the future, especially as block subsidy goes down and Bitcoin growth starts to level off, what we're going to see is that miners are only profitable if they have essentially free energy. And so that might be because you capture waste heat, that might be because it's stranded, or that might be because you're helping to bootstrap a new energy asset. But buy a big facility and just harness a bunch of energy at grid prices to make money, I think that's going to be a temporary blip in Bitcoin's history. So it's really going to be just a supportive ancillary service.
Do you think that could lead to a drop in hash rate then?
No, because there's so much negatively priced energy around the world.
Right, okay.
Yeah, because energy is always going to have a mismatch in supply and demand. It might take 10 years to build an asset, and then it might take another 10 years for demand to build up. You might overbuild some hydro in the wet season, you have too much, but in the dry season, you're good to go. It's just a natural byproduct of energy. The only thing that would change that is if batteries became like 10,000 times cheaper or something like that, where every bit of energy we harness, we could preserve. But that seems extremely unlikely right now. Possible. But let's say energy is essentially free going future. All of a sudden, all the things we want to build, the energy constraint is gone. And remember, energy is the master commodity of all products. So if the energy is gone, or the energy cost is gone, we can do wacky stuff like take water out of the ocean and take all the salt water out and literally just throw energy at the problem and produce fresh water.
So desalination of water,
correct,
salt water, that is an energy.
The constraint is energy. We can do it today. We have prototypes, but it's a negative ROI process right now.
Right, okay.
But we increase our energy capacity, decrease the cost. We'll have those plants all over the place. And fresh water is going to be a really big issue. We've been burning through it bad. I saw a map recently that showed the southwest of the US, which I think actually doesn't include LA, but let's say Arizona, Nevada, essentially all of that water comes from the Colorado River. So snow lands on the Rocky Mountains, melts, goes in the Colorado River, and goes all the way to Southern California. All their water is relying on that one river. Very, very vulnerable. So that's not a very good situation. Fresh water is going to cause wars in the future. It probably already has. If we can get rid of that problem, huge win for humanity. And there's a ton of things like that. Increased food production, space travel. I heard about this concept called molecular weight refineries, where you essentially just put material into a machine and that machine can then deconstruct it into the atoms or molecules that we need. Very like Star Trek-y. But again, energy is the input. We don't even pretend to build, we don't even think about building those things because the energy cost is so high.
Terraforming Mars?
Yeah.
How's that going to happen?
There's a lot of theories. I think that it's a very hard problem.
Doesn't Musk want to let off nuclear
That's one idea.
weapons in the atmosphere?
Yeah, sci-fi authors have been discussing this since the beginning. literally blow up bombs there or concentrate the sun's rays or there's all kinds of wacky ideas. But the reality is we evolved to live on Earth and everywhere else is trying to kill us. Mars, space, it's horrible. And so if we're going to live there comfortably, not under a bubble, we'd have to do things like that.
When you talk about early adopters leapfrogging the laggards, we might be looking in a decade, 2 decades time back at El Salvador and saying Bukele was a visionary.
Absolutely. He's taken a big risk, but I think we will look back on him and say that. The first example is just adopting Bitcoin. If you own Bitcoin on your balance sheet and other people don't, and the price goes up, you gained relatively your position in the world. So countries like El Salvador, nobody's heard of him. Nobody knew about Bukele before this. He buys some Bitcoin. He goes on a PR campaign. Now everybody knows him. And if the price goes up 5 years from now, all of a sudden El Salvador could be a serious country 10 years, 20 years from now. They might leapfrog those second tier countries that, they don't need to take the risk. And so the same is true with energy. If you have more energy, you have more wealth. So those who adopt Bitcoin mining in their own country have this flywheel of incentives that lead to more energy locally, which means cheaper goods, which means less reliance on other countries, which means better exports, higher quality of life, more innovation, et cetera. And so they're just base shifts in fundamentals. And we shouldn't be surprised that the rogue states are adopting Bitcoin because they have the most to lose or the most to gain, sorry.
Well, but they also have advantages of using the technology right now.
Well, anyone could use the technology right now, but if you're the leader in the US, you have everything to lose. Why would you take unnecessary risk? Right? It's like the innovator's dilemma. If you're in a large corporation, you stop taking risks. You stop creating products that will cannibalize your business, right? It's against human nature, which is why the upstart can shoot the moon with a new idea that the incumbent would never see, right? Why did Polaroid screw up and miss digital cameras, right? They actually patented it first. They came up with the technology 20 years ahead of time, but they were too arrogant as an organization. Human nature took over and they didn't innovate.
Same with Blockbuster.
Exactly.
I kind of think or hope that Bitcoin and now putting energy into this will become like this great leveler. So whereas we have a domestic wealth divide in the UK and you have it here in the US, we have a global wealth divide. I kind of hope it becomes a leveler.
So back to before, we don't want equality.
No, not equality, but a bit of a leveler.
We want to raise the standard of living for the lowest socioeconomic class above a certain point that we feel good about. And energy is 100% mandatory for that process.
Well, if it could wipe out the World Bank and the IMF and all these, centralized institutions which enforce economic slavery on these smaller nations, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, it allows developing countries to have real sustainable growth because it's funded in a way that's not predatory and it gives energy assets to that country. So then they can actually manufacture things instead of being reliant on expensive imports. And so, yes, I think that having sound money that's not politically captured and having lower cost incentives to produce energy at a lower cost, those are fundamental, right? If we have those, then we should be able to raise people out of poverty because food is cheaper, housing is cheaper, there's more jobs, materials are cheaper, transportation is cheaper, healthcare is cheaper, right? Those are what we need to have a standard of life that we can be proud of.
All right, talk to me about this parallel society idea because this is so interesting.
Yeah, so the theory stems from the idea of the great spreading out. Okay, so historically, cultures have lived on rivers and lakes. And they do that because rivers are transportation, fresh water, food, they're defendable.
Like
right?
Adelan, like we discussed earlier.
Bingo. It's a strategic point. Okay. In the future, if we're right about energy, we'll be able to harness these remote energy assets anywhere in the world and mine Bitcoin in the short term. And what that will lead to is humans may leave these mega cities, which is where all the energy assets are today. They'll leave those and essentially go wherever we want. And the spreading out, right, we could drop a nuclear reactor in the middle of nowhere and build a city around that. And so humans, I believe, will slowly spread out. They'll have more land. And it's a really important thing because we only have a couple hundred countries today, right? And there's They're not making more land, and we're not really experimenting with government structures. And so we're sort of stagnant. And I would like to see more competition between states. Like the best thing about the US, in my opinion, is federalism. The states compete, we try experiments, we learn from the wins and the losses of each state. Theoretically, we all benefit. I want to see that on the global scale. I want to go from 200 to 2,000 to maybe 20,000 territories where the local politics reflect the individual's desires. And one way we can do that is by distributing energy. And the only way to distribute energy more widely is to have a captive customer that comes with the energy asset. So it allows us to spread out.
But you also have that cultural side to Bitcoin, whereby you've talked to me about that project in Africa. I want to go and see it. I want to see the project. But there's the project in Honduras that we spoke to about. There's the one in Indonesia, Philippines.
Yeah.
One of the benefits of having 500,000 Twitter followers is I can go to any city in the world and say, I'm here. At least one person's going to come down the pub. You might get 5, you might get 20. And I know even though we might be completely different people, we've got something we align on, and we can hang out, we can talk, and it's great fun.
Yep.
And that when you talked about parallel societies, I was also thinking of that, in that these cities, you can travel from one to the other, and they're going to be your people with, and like you say, the politics might be different, but in terms of the general kind of direction you want things to go and the things you care about, there's going to be a lot of alignment.
I agree. It feels in a way like Galt's Gulch in cyberspace. The productive people want to step out of a system that we may not agree with, that you will have nothing and be happy. Right? Let's frame it this way. I view there's 2 paths this decade, and I'm simplifying a little bit. There's going to be mega cities, which are hyper efficient, totally surveilled. Literally, you will own nothing and be happy. And as we continue this like hollowing out of, if we continue down the fiat path, we're going to continue to remove low-level jobs. We're going to automate them away, and there's going to be less jobs for the bottom half of the population. What are we going to do? We're going to put them in mega cities with shipping container houses, free internet, free porn, bread and circuses, right? Just distract them and keep them there, because we can't just kill them all. So we have to consolidate them. That's one way to live. Another way to live is to be on the fringes of society, to go to one of these startup cities, to go west and colonize a new path. And I think what we're going to see is the inherently productive, entrepreneurial, visionary type people are going to feel suffocated in those mega cities, and they're going to venture out. And if you have a city with a bunch of productive people, it can be small and still have enormous productive output, because we have the internet, so we can work remotely. We have money that can't be stopped. We have decentralized energy, which can produce food. So we have everything we need to break apart from the matrix and create that parallel path. Now, I don't think it's going to be quite that simple, but I think this line of thinking really matters, because we're heading in a period where centralization is going to peak, and it's going to strangle the thing that makes humans special, which is individual action, individual entrepreneurship, problem solving, et cetera. So we're going to have these startup cities, and their role, in my mind, is to preserve the spark of freedom. It's to preserve the idea that humans can create amazing things simply because they want to. It doesn't need a central planner to steer the ship. And so, yeah, in a way, it's like preserving the spark that we need here. You will mine Bitcoin and be happy. I love it.
All right, listen, I mean, look, we can go on for ages on this. I know other people are going to want to talk to you about this. I feel like I should allow you to save some of it, but I do specifically want to finish on one bit, which is the moral imperative of this. And I feel that now. I feel this moral imperative to support Bitcoin in the best way possible. And I've not always been the best Bitcoiner. I've not always understood Bitcoin. I've not always understood why people think about Bitcoin in certain ways, but I definitely feel that moral imperative. I felt it so much after the interview with Gladstein when he talked about what the IMF and the World Bank is doing to people. I feel that moral imperative now. So, yeah, I think right now we're seeing billions of people suffering under authoritarian regimes, and they're not really able to save themselves because they don't have a monetary system that supports them. Okay, now we have Bitcoin. You have a mobile phone, you can sock away a few Satoshis, and hopefully you can protect yourself from that period, right? So I think there's a few points here for why it's our moral imperative. The first one I just mentioned, which is individuals can save themselves.
we have a way to store money outside of the system so you're not beholden to the fate of your state. Okay. The next one is that what we're going to do is we're going to unite all of the humans on the planet under one economic language. Everyone in the world can now contribute to a global economy with Satoshis that no one can stop. So what does this do for the budding entrepreneur in Kenya who can't get funding for his startup and he can't even really sell any products because his financial rails don't leave his country, right? Now he's on a Bitcoin standard and those ideas can enter the world. He can create something amazing that we all benefit from, right? How many Leonardo da Vinci's are buried in Kenya right now, but they can't get their idea out? How many Maya Angelos are in Timbuktu, but they just can't participate, right? So it's our moral imperative to get that human capital online, let them compete in the marketplace. A few of them will shoot the moon, create a life-changing innovation, and again, it raises up the bottom of the boat. And I think that's entirely lost when people are discussing Bitcoin. It connects us all on one specific economic language, and Szabo described this as social scalability, right? Which is the idea that how do humans cooperate in large numbers over space and time, right? We went from small tribes and we create agricultural societies and we're contributing there. Then we go to these feudal states, industrial states. Now we're in the nation state game. Each advancement there required technologies that allow us to cooperate better, whether it's language, whether it's property rights, whether it's courts, whether it's armies and borders, religion. All these things allow us to cooperate better. And since the Industrial Revolution, we've essentially hit a glass ceiling on social scalability. It's large nation states, whoever has the most army, the most power wins. So magnitude of power rules. And we're going to just fight over resources forever in this game until we can find a way to transcend that nation state, to shatter the glass ceiling of the nation state. And I think what Bitcoin does is it slowly erodes that large state incentive, right? Similar to the sovereign individual thesis, it erodes that game. It allows us to all connect on a invisible substrate in cyberspace, sending Satoshis around. And it knows not of the borders. And that alone brings people online and it allows us to cooperate more, allows us to break into 10 or 100 times as many jurisdictions. And I think all of these are good for humans. And the final one is and we touched on this earlier with regards to moral imperative, is it removes the incentive to capture the money. So it produces more it shifts productive people to the market rather than capture the money. You add all those up and it's very clear that it is our moral imperative to bring this on. If you care about people, give them some energy, give them some Bitcoin. If you care about people, let their ideas enter the world and compete, and the good ideas help everyone.